Ah, Christmas. A time for friends, family, and of course, quality NBA basketball. Every Christmas, the NBA gives us all a gift that every fan can appreciate. The best teams and players going at it on national television. It's been a tradition going on for decades. This year, it's LeBron and Steph, Russ and Kat, Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard. In previous years, we've seen Kobe and Wade, Jordan and Isaiah, Shaq and Timmy, etc. Big names such as these are just bound to get buckets, which they do. In the NBA's Christmas days alone, there have been 119 30-point games. A lot, isn't it, just for one day? But there's been certain performances that really make you believe that Santa is actually somehow mind-controlling these players in order to give some fan their wish of seeing a great game. Here are some of the greatest Christmas performances in NBA history. A little disclaimer here, I'm not judging solely off of performances alone. I'm going to be using a combination of the game's intensity, the storyline, and the difficulty of performance. So basically, don't expect Wilt Chamberlain. With that out of the way, enjoy. Number 1. Bernard King at Madison Square Garden. Once upon a time, there was a player named Bernard King. King was a 28-year-old player who was unstoppable in his prime. In fact, he was so unstoppable, he led the league in scoring with 32 points a game. But unfortunately, he was hindered by the Knicks, who went 24-58 that season. Later on in that season, he suffered a major injury to his knee and never really came back the same player. Sure, he was still a solid 20-point scorer and averaged 28 points a game as a 34-year-old, but I feel like a lot of people would know about him more if he hadn't had that pesky injury. But that's for another day. Enter Madison Square Garden on December 25th, 1984. Where everyone in New York was hyped for a Christmas gift in the form of points from Bernard King against the Nets. At the time, the Nets were doing what they normally do, lose. They were at an 11-17 record, which is better than the Nets right now at least. Somehow they bounced back and got over a 500 record and made the playoffs, but they got swept.
That sounds about right.
The Knicks weren't doing too hot either, at a 12-18 record, which was caused by both injuries and the Knicks just being trash that season. Honestly, the only reason to watch this game was because of Bernard King. The previous winter, he dropped 50 points in consecutive games against San Antonio and Dallas, and dropped 31 his last Christmas. So viewers had all the reason to watch an otherwise pointless game. Everyone felt the Christmas spirit in the air, including Bernard. He knew that his team was hindered by injuries, so he had to amp up the production from his 26 points per game average. And that he did. 3 minutes in, Bernard hits a little fadeaway baseline jumper that gives him the and one, which he converts. Then he gets a floater over the center, which falls straight through the net. Then he gets fouled. Then he hits another baseline fader. Come halftime, Bernard has 40. Later about the game, he said he didn't even have to think about scoring. aka he lived out the term unconscious. He ended up with 60 points and a loss, but it was still quite impressive. Unlike some people, Clay, won't tell us, 60 minus 29 equals 31. The Warriors blew a 31 lead. Bernard was being guarded tightly the entire game. Almost the entire team tried to guard him, and they all failed. Among those failures were Buck Williams and Michael Ray Richardson, both all defensive first-team players, and Richardson leading the league in steals. It was so bad that one of the Nets' big men had 4 fouls in the first quarter. All in all, this definitely belongs on the list of the greatest Christmas performances of all time. Next on the Christmas list, we're going to be checking it twice, because we have a double entry of Tracy McGrady and the rookie LeBron James. The year is 2003, and the NBA is excited to watch the future of the NBA play in his very first Christmas. And it isn't an easy matchup either, as he faces a superstar guard in Tracy McGrady. Like Bernard King, he should have been a lot higher on the all-time greatest lists, but he is struck down by the cruel hand of injury. But I digress. Even though there was nothing at stake, as they were both terrible teams, the matchup had been hyped up ever since last season, when LeBron was spotted scouting McGrady in the playoffs. At the time, LeBron was listed at shooting guard, as well as McGrady, so everyone was to be treated to one of LeBron's first challenges, and he did not disappoint. The game started off with a LeBron James baseline floater, and then a three-pointer. Rare for his game now. Then Tracy McGrady responds with a free throw miss and make, and then he rises up for a ferocious tomahawk slam. LeBron keeps up with McGrady for the entire time of regulation, and at the end of the game, it was tied 97-97. In overtime, the Magic handled the Cavs relatively easy, winning 113-101. In the game, T-Mac put up 41 points and 11 assists, along with 8 rebounds. And LeBron put up 34 and 6 assists, and 8 turnovers, but you can't blame him, he was a rookie. Both teams didn't make the playoffs, but this was definitely the NBA's best Christmas gift that year. Next on the list is someone who's basically the Black Santa Claus. That's right, the round mound of rebound himself, Charles Barkley. Despite having the same body type as Santa...
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the...
He really doesn't have the same spirit about Christmas. He doesn't like it because his family and quote-unquote friends like to take advantage of him to buy a new house or a car or something new and shiny or whatever. But before that, in 1993, Charles seemed to love Christmas. The year before, in 1992, Chuck was the man. He won MVP and took the Phoenix Suns to the finals against Jordan's Bulls, having to go against the Seattle Supersonics, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Los Angeles Lakers. He probably would have done just as good the very next year, but he started experiencing severe back pains. These back pains were so bad and so painful that Chuck was contemplating retirement. He really didn't know if he could play anymore. So throughout the entire 1993 season, Chuck was battling injuries while playing. On Christmas though, Santa must have healed him for 24 hours or something, because he went off against Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the best centers in NBA history, and his Houston Rockets, who won the championship later that year. That didn't matter to Chuck though. He had 38 points and 18 rebounds, and dishing out 4 dimes. Despite Hakeem having 27 points and 13 rebounds, he was quote-unquote held to 13 rebounds. The one thing that makes it really impressive, despite having almost 40 and 20, is that the people who were guarding him were at least 6'9", while Charles Barkley has been listed to as short as 6'4". Not only that, but he was constantly double-teamed. This performance just really shows how good a basketball player Chuck was. Not many people recognize him for that. They recognize others like John Stockton and Karl Malone oh, those guys never won a championship, but they're super good, but you almost never hear Charles Barkley in the conversation. The only time you hear about him now is when he's on TNT and saying stuff like,
That's terrible.
I got 2 words for you. Steve Nash and Chris Paul. Must-see TV.
That's more than 2 words.
The Suns went on to blow out the Rockets that game, winning 111-91. Alright, next up we have a little bit of Christmas drama in this game. The year is 2004, and Shaquille O'Neal has signed to the Miami Heat from the Los Angeles Lakers because he could not stand Kobe Bryant. I won't go much into it here, but you can go check out NBA Insider's video on it, after this one of course. The link will be in the description. But all I'll say here is that Kobe and Shaq simply hated each other at this point in time. So of course, David Stern had to have the 2 players reunite on the court for some good old-fashioned NBA Christmas fun. The 2 players didn't acknowledge each other much. Shaq refused to even look at Kobe. During the game, he did whatever it took to keep Kobe from scoring around the basket, as long as he was in. The game was basically 2 things: Shaq dunking on anyone trying to get in his way, and Kobe hitting a difficult shot from an isolation. So basically it kept pretty close. At the end of regulation, the game was tied. However, Shaq had acquired his 6th foul from Kobe, so he was unable to play in the overtime. The Heat still managed to pull through 104-102, thanks to a young DWade, who had an impressive 29 points and 10 assists as a sophomore. No one cared about that though, really. This game had the highest regular season TV rating since 1998. And that was because people wanted to see the drama unfold between Kobe and Shaq. Speaking of which, Kobe ended up with 42 points and 6 assists and 9 turnovers, and Shaq had 24 points and 11 rebounds. This performance was just more than stats. It was about rivalries and hatred, and that's what some NBA fans love to see. That's why this game is one of the most, or perhaps the most, entertaining game in NBA Christmas history. Anyways, on to the next one. What we have here is a continuation of last game, pretty much. Lakers vs Heat 2 years later. But this time there is no Shaq, as he was out with injuries. The young Wade had started making a name for himself since they last met on Christmas. The season before, Wade averaged 27 points a game, and was the #1 scoring option on the 05-06 Heat, who had won the championship. Kobe was still going strong in Shaq's absence, as the 05-06 season was the one where he averaged 35 points a game and should have won MVP. Coming into the game, Kobe and Wade had nearly identical stats, both coming in at 28 apiece and 5 rebounds a game. Wade had more assists because he had the better team. So despite there being no Shaq, this was still a very, very good game.
What?
And everyone was excited for it. Now, looking at this matchup, you might be thinking, whoa, so both Kobe and Wade went off? Well, that's not what really happened. Kobe just wasn't able to defend Wade. He was called Flash for a reason. Wade would just blow by Kobe like it was no one's business. And if someone else came to help, he would just dish it out to them for an easy splash or easy bucket. It was just like terrible. It was terrible defense. It was just everything was bad. It wasn't bad for Wade though. He had 40 points on 60% shooting, 11 assists, 4 rebounds, 4 blocks, and 4 steals. Really, really impressive, isn't it? Now you're thinking, oh no, what did Kobe do? Like, at least he put up 20 points, right?
Nope.
Kobe had 16 points on 4 of 17 shooting. It was a terrible night for Kobe. And honestly, just embarrassing for Lakers fans. But you honestly can't blame Kobe. He was on a terrible team. I'm pretty sure Kwame Brown was on the roster still, and they had Smush Parker, who Kobe really didn't like, hated honestly. Basically, the point is that Kobe was all by himself. He was his own offense. While there are teams that have bad days, if Kobe has a bad day, there's nothing he can do about it. He can't pass it to anyone else or anything like that. So he has to keep shooting. The Lakers ended up losing by 16 points, a game that was 101 to 85. Now everyone thought that this would be like LeBron James and Grady of 3 years before, where they would be both going at it, both scoring over 30, maybe even over 40. It was the next versus the now. But in this game, the next simply dominated. You know what I think? I think that Wade had a grudge. He put up almost 30 points and 10 assists in a Christmas game against Kobe Bryant, one of the best shooting guards of all time, and he didn't get any credit for it. Only because of this stupid argument between Kobe and Shaq. So I think he was holding a grudge. But anyway, let's just keep it rolling. It's nearly impossible to have a greatest performance video without the actual greatest player in the history of basketball. Brian Scalabrine had one of the most dazzling sorry guys. What I meant was what the media thinks is the greatest of all time in basketball. Scal's performance was so good they wiped all records of it, so I can't really talk about it. Okay, here it goes. Michael Jordan had a pretty good game against the Knicks. It's eclipsed by Scal's though, where he put up 42 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals against their rivals at the time. In last season's playoffs, the Knicks nearly upsetted the Bulls in the second round, taking the series all the way to 7 games. If you're to know anything about Michael Jordan, it's that he is the most competitive player in the history of basketball, perhaps even in the history of modern sports. When he goes up against a matchup like that on Christmas, he will have a grudge, and he will take advantage any way he has to. And that he did. The Knicks took on a 10-point lead only after the first quarter, and maintained that lead going into the second half. But when you're playing Jordan's Bulls, you never really have a lead until the end of the game. Mike and the Bulls held the Knicks to a 28-point half, compared to the first one where they had 49. What really makes this amazing is that Jordan basically did this by himself. The second highest scoring Bull was Scottie Pippen with 16. The rest of the team didn't even make it into double-digit scoring. Patrick Ewing must have come down with the same Jordan flu that Nick Anderson had. He only shot 33% and had 14 points. He was outscored by a bench player. That's when you know something is wrong, when your star is outscored by a bench player. Of course, I had to add this one. While it may not be as impressive as 42 or 38 and 18, all that, this is still the GOAT's best Christmas performance. And although not as great as his other ones, this one still impresses. And that's the video, guys. If you liked it, do the obvious thing. And if you want to stay around for more stuff, you can go hit that subscribe button perhaps. Maybe give me a little bit of a Christmas present? I don't know. Yeah. I'll see you guys later.